We got a chance!
Some movies feel like they were made by kids having the time of their lives, because they were. Shot in 1984 along the Oregon coast with a cast of actual children, practically no CGI, and enough chaos to fill a book, The Goonies became one of the most beloved adventure films ever made. Today, we're going back behind the scenes to look at what really went on during production. This is 10 bizarre things that happened on the set of The Goonies. A little background. The Goonies was released on June 7, 1985, directed by Richard Donner and produced by Steven Spielberg, Harvey Bernhard, and Kathleen Kennedy.
God, what's wrong with you people? Rosalita, come here. Wait, you gotta let me out of here, Rosalita!
The screenplay was written by Chris Columbus, based on a story by Spielberg. The film follows a group of kids from a neighborhood called the Goondocks in Astoria, Oregon, who discover a pirate treasure map and descend into a network of caverns and booby traps beneath their town in a last-ditch effort to save their homes from foreclosure. It was, in many respects, a perfectly engineered piece of 1980s cinema, part adventure, part comedy, part coming-of-age story, with a villain family, a gentle giant, a pirate ship, and a chase sequence through a water slide carved into solid rock. The cast included Sean Astin, Josh Brolin, Corey Feldman, Cary Green, Martha Plimpton, Jonathan Key Quan, and Jeff Cohen. Most of them first-time or near first-time actors.
Bye! Adios, señorita!
Most of them between 10 and 16 years old. What audiences saw on screen looked like a seamless, freewheeling adventure. What actually happened on set was considerably more complicated, more funny, more strange, and occasionally more dangerous than anything shown on film. The production lasted several months, stretched across location shooting in Astoria, Oregon, and soundstage work at Warner Brothers in Burbank, California, and generated a collection of stories that the cast has been telling and laughing about for 40 years. Here are 10 of the most bizarre things that happened on the set of The Goonies. Number 10, the kids were kept away from the sets until filming day. One of the most deliberate and unusual decisions Richard Donner made during production was to keep the child cast from seeing the film's major sets before they were needed on camera.
And shoot it. Number 1.
The tunnels, the caverns, the skeleton organ, the pirate ship, none of it was shown to the young actors in advance. Donner wanted their reactions on camera to be completely genuine, and he understood that a group of 12-year-olds who had spent an afternoon poking around a full-scale replica pirate ship would have very little authentic wonder left by the time the cameras rolled. The strategy worked almost too well. When the cast was finally brought onto the pirate ship set for the first time, an enormous, fully realized galleon built on a Warner Brothers soundstage. Their reaction was immediate and completely unscripted. They ran in every direction, climbing the rigging, sliding down ropes, exploring the lower decks, shouting to each other across the ship. Donner kept the cameras rolling and used much of what he captured. The scene where the Goonies first lay eyes on the Inferno has an energy in it that no amount of direction could have manufactured, because it wasn't manufactured. Those kids were genuinely seeing something they had never seen before, in the middle of a job they were already finding hard to believe they had. Sean Astin later said the moment of first walking onto that ship was one of the most vivid memories of his entire childhood. He had no frame of reference for what he was looking at. It was simply the most extraordinary thing he had ever seen in a room. Number 9, Josh Brolin couldn't stop laughing and Spielberg had to step in. Josh Brolin was 17 years old when The Goonies began shooting, and it was his very first film.
Crash the Goondocks.
When they wreck our house, I hope they make it a sand trap.
His father was the established actor James Brolin, so he had grown up around film sets and understood in theory what a professional production looked like. But understanding it in theory and being the one standing in front of the camera when someone calls action are two entirely different things. Nothing had quite prepared him for what the second of those actually felt like. On his first day of shooting, Brolin found he simply could not stop laughing. Not because anything was particularly funny, it was nerves, pure and simple. Every time the crew called action, he broke. Take after take, he laughed. The half day of filming ground to a near halt, with the crew waiting, the setup sitting idle, and a teenager unable to compose himself long enough to get through a single usable take.
Forget about any adventures, limp lungs. I let you out and Mama ground my ass, and I got a date with Andy on Friday, all right?
Brolin recalled the moment years later in a conversation with actors Glenn Powell and Lee Pace. Every time they called action, he laughed uncontrollably out of nerves, until Steven Spielberg finally walked over to him personally and said, quietly and directly, that this was costing money. It is difficult to overstate what that moment must have felt like. Spielberg was, by 1984, the most commercially successful director in Hollywood, the man behind Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. Being the teenager who had just burned half a day of his production budget by laughing was not a position anyone would want to be in. Brolin pulled himself together, got through the scene, and the laughing stopped.
For that, when our parents were our age, I mean, haven't you ever heard of that guy? What's his name? The pirate guy.
He has told the story with considerable self-deprecation in the years since. The teenage kid who nearly derailed his own debut because he couldn't get through a single take without breaking. But the story also says something real about what it is to be 17 years old on a major Hollywood set for the very first time, surrounded by crew members and a producer whose name was on every other movie poster in the country. The laughing was the most human possible response to that situation. Number 8. The entire production devolved into a full-scale prank war. What began as a film set gradually turned into something resembling a competition to see who could humiliate whom most creatively. And it wasn't just the children driving it. Richard Donner and Steven Spielberg were, by multiple accounts,
Can't stand no more. I got it.
the ringleaders of an atmosphere that prioritized mischief as freely as it prioritized anything else. The pranks escalated steadily throughout production. Joe Pantoliano, who played Francis Fratelli, stole the parking nameplate from Robert Davies' reserved spot. Davi had been particularly proud that his parking space was next to Spielberg's, and Pantoliano knew exactly where it would sting. Davi retaliated methodically. He waited until Pantoliano was lying down in his dressing room, and then nailed the door shut from the outside. Pantoliano woke up to banging and found himself unable to get out. The crew had to come and physically pry the door open. Davi was satisfied, but the most elaborate prank of the entire production came at the very end of it, and it was entirely Spielberg's doing.
I swear on my life, they've got it. A giant.
By the time filming wrapped, Richard Donner had been working with the same group of loud, energetic, relentlessly unpredictable children for the better part of a year. He was exhausted. Spielberg himself later recalled that the cumulative effect of the cast on Donner had been wearing him down piece by piece in the final weeks. Donner kept telling anyone who would listen that the moment the film wrapped, he was flying to his house in Hawaii, and he was going to sit in the quiet and not speak to a child for as long as he could manage. Spielberg heard all of this and filed it away. When the production wrapped, Donner flew to Hawaii exactly as planned. Within days, Spielberg had quietly organized and funded a flight that brought the entire cast to Donner's house. Sean Astin, Josh Brolin, Jeff Cohen, Martha Plimpton, and the rest of the Goonies, along with the actors who had played the Fratelli family.
Let's get out of here.
Donner opened his door in Hawaii expecting peace and quiet. What he got was every child from the Goonies on his doorstep, plus their villains. Footage of the moment survived, and it shows Donner's face cycling through genuine shock, helpless recognition, and the particular expression of a man who has just realized there is absolutely nothing he can do about what is happening to him. He had made a movie about kids who never gave up. He should have seen it coming. Number 7. Chunk's Truffle. Shuffle was genuinely uncomfortable to film. One of the most memorable moments in the film, Chunk's Truffle Shuffle, in which the character is forced to lift his shirt and shake his stomach before being let into the house, was not a comfortable experience for Jeff Cohen to perform.
On! Do it!
He was 11 years old when the film was shot, and being asked to repeatedly expose his belly on camera while a crew of adults filmed him was, by his own account, embarrassing in a way that was real and not particularly funny in the moment. Cohen has spoken about this in interviews since, with considerable good humor. He has made clear that nobody on set was unkind to him and that the scene was handled with care, but that there was an unavoidable awkwardness to being a self-conscious preteen doing that specific thing on a film set. What appeared on screen as gleeful and uninhibited was the product of multiple takes and a fair amount of internal discomfort that Cohen simply worked through.
Kinda like us, Mike. The Goonies. Yeah, I'm not a reject.
What makes this story worth telling is what happened afterward. Cohen went on to study law at the University of California, Berkeley, and built a career as an entertainment attorney in Hollywood, ultimately choosing not to continue acting. He has said that the experience of being a child actor, including moments like the Truffle Shuffle, gave him a very clear-eyed understanding of the industry from a young age, which served him well in a different kind of career. He has returned to the Goonies community warmly over the years and has nothing but affection for the film. But he has also been honest that not every memory from that production was as carefree as the movie looked. Number 6, the octopus scene was cut but never forgotten. There is a scene in the Goonies that most people have never seen in the theatrical version, but that every cast member remembers vividly. An encounter with a giant mechanical octopus in the underground cavern. The octopus was built for the film, filmed, and then cut from the final release because test audiences found it unconvincing and it disrupted the pacing of the climax. The sequence was meant to occur near the end of the film, as the Goonies made their way through the final stretch of underground tunnels. The creature effects were practical, a large animatronic and hydraulic apparatus operated by a crew of technicians. And the filming of the scene was, by several accounts, a logistical ordeal. The set was cramped, the machine was unpredictable, and the water was cold. Several of the actors were soaked repeatedly during takes that were ultimately unusable. What makes it a genuine piece of the film's lore is the brief reference that survived in the theatrical cut. Near the end of the movie, Data mentions that the octopus was really scary. It's a throwaway line that only makes sense if you know what was cut, which audiences didn't, but which became a beloved piece of trivia once the scene began circulating in behind-the-scenes footage and home video extras. The mechanical octopus that never made it into the movie became, in its own way, as famous as many things that did. Number 5. Jonathan Key Quan did most of his own stunts. Jonathan Key Quan, who played Data, the Goonies' gadget-obsessed inventor, was 14 years old during production and was, by the recollection of nearly everyone involved, the most physically daring member of the cast. Several of the action sequences that involved Data's inventions
Did you see the clothes? Drug dealers won't be caught dead in those part of yesterday.
also involved Quan himself performing the physical work. including the coat sleeve grappling hook sequence and portions of the water slide chase near the end of the film. Quan had come to the production from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom the previous year, where he had played Short Round, another physically demanding role that had given him experience with action filmmaking at a young age. He was comfortable around camera equipment and understood the mechanics of what was being filmed well enough to contribute actively to how his scenes were staged. The water slide sequence, a long chase through a series of underground water channels, was filmed at a location in Oregon and on-set constructions designed to connect the two environments. Parts of it required Quan to move through very cold water at speed, with camera equipment rolling alongside. He did the work without complaint, and the energy in those sequences is in large part the energy Quan brought to them personally. His trajectory after the Goonies became one of the most extraordinary comeback stories in Hollywood. After a decade of reduced opportunities in the 1990s, he stepped away from acting and worked behind the scenes as a stunt coordinator and assistant director. He returned to acting in 2022 with Everything Everywhere All at Once, and his performance in that film won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 2023, one of the most celebrated returns to the screen in recent memory. Number 4. The real Astoria locations were a challenge to film. Much of the early portion of the Goonies, the Goondocks neighborhood, the Walsh family house, the Fratelli restaurant at the beginning, was filmed on location in Astoria, Oregon.
Listen, okay? You guys will never believe me. There's 2 cop cars, okay?
A real city at the northwestern tip of the state where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. Astoria was chosen because its geography matched the story, a coastal town on cliffs, with the ocean visible from the hills, and neighborhoods of older wooden houses that felt authentically lived in rather than constructed. Filming in an actual city with real weather on the Oregon coast in 1984 introduced a set of problems that a soundstage would not have. The weather was consistently uncooperative. The fog, rain, and overcast skies that gave the film its particular visual texture were not always welcome when the production needed to match lighting from one day to the next. Schedule disruptions due to weather were frequent, and the production had to adapt regularly to conditions it could not control. The town itself became part of the story in ways nobody had entirely planned. Astoria's residents turned out in considerable numbers to watch the filming, and crowd control around the location shoots was a recurring logistical challenge. The house used as the Walsh family home at 368 38th Street in Astoria became an immediate landmark once the film was released. 40 years later, it still draws visitors from around the world, and the city has built an entire layer of tourism around the film's presence in its streets. Number 3. Josh Brolin was virtually unknown before the film. Josh Brolin, who played Brand Walsh, Mikey's older brother and the reluctant older kid presence in the group, had almost no professional acting experience before the Goonies. He had grown up in a show business family.
We're in deep, absolutely the deepest...
Shit, Ma.
I don't like that language.
His father is actor James Brolin, but had not pursued acting seriously as a teenager, and the role of Brand was essentially his first significant film work. He was 17 during production, and the gap in age between him and the younger cast members was a real one, not just a character dynamic. He occupied a slightly different space on set, older than the core group, not yet an established name, navigating a large production without the experience to know what he was navigating. He has spoken in interviews about the particular oddness of being a teenager on a set like that, surrounded by chaos, working with a director of Donner's caliber, and genuinely uncertain at times about what he was doing.
Hey!
What are you saying, House? What's he saying?
He found his footing as filming progressed, and Brand's combination of exasperation and loyalty toward the younger kids was something Brolin drew from real feelings on set. The career that followed took years to fully develop. Through the late 1980s and the 1990s, Brolin worked steadily, but without major stardom. He was not widely recognized as one of Hollywood's most compelling actors until his mid-career, when roles in No Country for Old Men in 2007, Milk in 2008, True Grit in 2010, and Sicario in 2015 established him definitively. His casting as Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe brought him the largest audience of his career. But it started improbably with a teenager on a bike in Astoria, Oregon. Number 2. Steven Spielberg was evacuated from the set after a shooting. Of all the strange things that happened during the making of the Goonies, this one stands alone. During location shooting in Astoria, Oregon, the set came under fire. Actual gunfire. Car windows were blowing out near the filming area, and 911 calls started coming in from the surrounding neighborhood. The police responded, and Steven Spielberg was hustled into a police car and driven away from the location. The story gets stranger from there. When the police tracked down the source of the shooting, they found 2 children, aged roughly 8, 9, or 10 years old, firing out of a bedroom window with their father's .22 rifle. The parents had left to go to the hospital because the mother was in labor. The children had found the rifle and decided, apparently, that the activity outside was worth shooting at. Number 1. The pirate ship set was demolished immediately after filming. The full-scale replica of the Inferno, the pirate ship that serves as the culmination of the Goonies' underground journey, was one of the largest and most elaborate practical sets built for a film in that era. Constructed on a soundstage at Warner Brothers in Burbank, it was a working replica of a period sailing vessel, complete with rigging, lower decks, and enough detail to convince a group of 12-year-olds seeing it for the first time that they had walked into another century. It took months to build. It was used for a relatively small portion of the final film's runtime, and it was torn down almost immediately after production wrapped on those scenes. This was standard practice for large practical sets in studio filmmaking. The economics of maintaining them rarely made sense beyond the shoot, but the speed of the demolition still struck some of the cast as jarring when they learned about it. Sean Astin has mentioned the ship's disappearance in interviews as something that gave him an early lesson in the temporary nature of filmmaking. The thing that felt the most real and permanent was gone before the movie was even finished. The Inferno existed for a matter of months, in a building in Burbank, and then it was lumber. What remained of it was the footage, which has now been watched by tens of millions of people over 40 years, which is its own kind of permanence. Looking back at the Goonies 40 years on, what's striking is how much of what made it work was genuinely accidental. The unscripted reactions, the improvised dialogue,
You smell like physics!
the real discomfort that bled into real performance, the chaotic energy of a group of children who could not be fully controlled and so were simply pointed in a direction and filmed. Richard Donner knew what he was doing when he made those choices, but he also knew when to step back and let something happen that he hadn't planned. And then there were the things nobody planned at all. The teenager who laughed through his first day on set, the dressing room door nailed shut, the surprise in Hawaii, the police car on a residential street in Astoria. A production that generated this many stories, this many moments that nobody wrote down in advance, was a production that was alive in a way that most sets never are. The film turned out the way it did because of those choices and because of those particular kids in that particular place at that particular moment. A production that was, by every practical measure,
Really scary, look at that.
difficult and expensive and frequently chaotic somehow, produced something that has lasted 40 years without losing a single frame of its energy. The inferno is gone. The tunnels were sets. The booby traps were props. But the friendships were real. The reactions were real. And the movie was real. And that's what people have been responding to ever since. If you enjoyed this look behind the scenes, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us more than you might realize, and it means we can keep making videos just like this one. Drop a comment below and let us know which of these stories surprised you the most. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you in the next one.